thing we must do, of course, I mentioned recognizing the fact that our lives are unmanageable, is we must consider the solution to be found in what we refer to as Iwa Pele, as being just what the keynote speaker said. It is Ifa, the new morality. We must honor the truth about ourselves, admitting that our lives are emotionally unstable and difficult for us to manage, together with other economic factors that does not make it any easier for us, but to honor the truth about ourselves and for us to get a grasp of our history, to know how we ended up in this situation is very, very essential as a second step. All right? What we need to do is to realize that fitting in to this behavior is not going to help us. We must recognize that this behavior is in fact a malady or a sickness that was developed by reactive behavior, and specifically our reaction to trauma. All right, so that will be my first lesson, and it's some really simple points. The first thing is recognizing we have a problem in terms of managing our lives, our emotions. Secondly, recognizing that because of the impact of colonization on our lives, the trauma condition which created our new patterns of social behavior, which of course is socially engineered confusion, once we admit that there is where we are today and understand the history that brought us here, we must look at IFA as the new morality, recognizing that if we organize ourselves individually based on Iwa Pele, it is the first step towards honoring not only our culture and tradition, but bringing ourselves back to the state that we knew and that molded us as individuals firstly, and then at the community level. All right, and with that, I'm going to now move on to reading, doing our history reading for this week. All right, I'm going to read from Immigration into the West Indies in the 19th Century by K.O. Lawrence. And to give context, what this book describes is the labor situation in Trinidad after 1838. All right, it explains what the former plantation owners or slave owners did after emancipation and apprenticeship. Emancipation was in 1834, and the apprenticeship lingered until about 38. All right, so let me go and read. During the 1870s, much was done to improve the condition of immigrant labor. New immigration laws were enacted in Jamaica in 1869 and in Trinidad in 1870, while in British Guyana, the results of the Commission of Inquiry was a complete overhaul of the law in 1873. When re-indenture was limited to 1 year at a time, as had always been the practice outside British Guyana and the French colonies. Thereafter, immigrants in the British colonies and in Suriname appear to have been adequately housed in rooms of 100 square feet for 3 adults, although often with poor sanitation and ventilation, and they were largely free from positive ill treatment, though there was a good deal of passive neglect and from time to time a scandalous incident. In such cases, the authorities usually acted with energy once they became aware of the situation. But the system of inspection was not always adequate, and liturgic officials sometimes failed to uncover cases of neglect, especially in the smaller islands or remote districts where travel was difficult. Certainly, the regulations were very detailed, covering minute matters of housing, hospital accommodation, sanitation, and conditions of work, but they depended for their operation on officials of varying quality, and the high standard of Trinidad's enforcement machinery in the third quarter of the century must be seen against the scandalous neglect practiced in Grenada in 1878 to 1879, or St. Vincent in 1882. There were always some estate managers who were not prepared to do much for the welfare of immigrants in their employ, while some tended to view them merely as useful for labor purposes so long as they lasted, believing that hospitalization was the only valid excuse for absence from work. From time to time, offending managers were penalized, but far too many still escaped. In the French islands, in particular, arrangements for inspection were often inadequate, and the immigrants were perhaps worse off than elsewhere. And where immigrants were widely dispersed, as in Jamaica, adequate inspection and medical attention were very difficult to achieve, and officials were too prone to complacency after the reforms of the 1870s. Phrases like "nothing can be more successful than the working of our immigration system," as Governor Irving of Trinidad said in 1878, came far too readily to boot governors and protectors of immigrants. To both governors and protection of immigrants. All right? And that would be my reading from Immigration into the West Indies in the 19th Century by K.O. Lawrence. I'm going to do some more reading from this book called Cedulants and Capitulants. All right? Let me give a little context before I read. This particular book is based on lectures that were given in the Mona campus in the University of the West Indies by lecturer Carl C. Campbell. The title of the book is Cedulants and Capitulants. Its subtitle is The Politics of the Colored Opposition in the Slave Society of Trinidad between 1783 and 1838. All right. Each week I try to give a little context. I explain the so-called colored people spoken about in this book would have been a mixture between Moorish bloodlines of Spain and Portuguese people, as well as it would have also been a mixture of the Moorish bloodlines with the Spaniards. All right. There were also mulattoes who were of French and African origin. All right? So I'm going to start reading. This section is called Resistance Without Violence. The free coloreds of Trinidad never resorted to violence to achieve the goal of civil equality. In the 1780s and the 1790s, when refugees and immigrants, some free colored, were entering the island, there was considerable apprehension, especially in 1796, by the Spanish authorities that free coloreds of French extraction might carry the revolutionary ideas of their brothers from the French Antilles into the colonies. The British inherited these apprehensions even after the immigration had ceased. There were colored Republicans, but as in many other areas in the world, revolutionary refugees did not carry revolution to the country of exile. Indeed, the refugees and immigrants found new economic opportunities to become landowners in Trinidad and to settle down to become peaceful fathers of families. In Venezuela, there was a war of liberation in which coloreds participated as rebels and conservatives. Some of the colored rebels camped occasionally on the shores of Trinidad, whose neighboring coastline was strategically part of their